Ladies and gentlemen, we're with a guy. I finally found out that this gentleman I've been seeing all along, and he has some valuable information for us. A lot of you in Toronto here would know this face when you see it, but so without further ado, I'd ask you to introduce yourself, let the people know when you came here to Toronto. Obviously, you know we're looking at the Toronto Caribbean soccer history here, and I realize you have some information to add to the history.
My name is Selwyn Henry. My nickname, most popular name that people know me by is the Doc. I arrived in Canada on the 28th of August, 1967. Lived in the Parliament and Front area during my early years after arrival. My first encounter with the members of the Caribbean community was Carly and Dick Lochan, who had a soccer team in Scarborough, and through the guy I stayed with for the first week, Eddie, who was involved in Caravana, introduced me to Carly and Dick Lochan, and that was my first involvement with Caribbean people, Trinidadians, who were playing football in Canada. That was in 67, the fall of the 67, as we know, the soccer season is in the summer in Canada, as opposed to where I came from in England, where the soccer season began in September. My job at the time, I was a skilled biochemical technician when I came from England. I started working at the Toronto General Hospital in the lab there. That's where I met Clyde McNeil, and he and I became friends, and we went on to become roommates in St. Jamestown, a number of apartment buildings in the Wesley, Parliament, Bloor, Sherborne area. Clyde was living in Jamestown at that time. He had come to his sister, and he had come to the point where he decided to move out and set up his own space. 99 Howard. 77 Howard, sorry. There I met a number of Trinidadians and other Caribbean residents of that neighborhood. Amongst them was Alvin Thomas, Junior Parker, Ronald Reiner. Ronald Reiner came and met us there. Roland, his brother, Guy Guerra, that was about, and a number of other students who were attending UFT. So there was all those Caribbean males living in the St. Jamestown in the different buildings. They populated probably about 6 buildings in the St. Jamestown community. Our practice at that time was to play small goalposts in the schoolyard, which was the center of the St. Jamestown community. From that, I got to know Neville Glanville, who had just started Western United, was beginning to look to start Western United. At that time, he was part of, I think it was primarily a cricket team. And Neville was more interested in getting back into soccer. So I decided I had the opportunity to go back to university, and I could hold my job at TGS because they ran a 24/7 service from the lab. So in 68, I entered UFT, whilst continuing to work at the Toronto General Hospital.
Do you recall what time, what year and what time that was?
That was 68, and it was late 68 when I hooked up with Neville. Towards the end of the soccer season.
Was he in those team already when you met him?
He was part of the team. Neville Glanville came out of his team to form Western United.
Well, I need to correct that. He didn't form it because the history showing he went and met Mr. Bailey there. And there was a West Indies there already, or there was a team there, and he joined into that team. Right?
Yeah, I know Mr. Bailey, so your information is definitely correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So you recall where they were practicing?
Not specifically, no.
So you recall where Granville was living?
Neville moved to, no, I know him living in East York. But he had moved from the west to that location because I didn't know him before that.
Were you a member of West Indies?
Yes, I was. I was a member of West Indies. I did join officially.
And you remember from what year?
68. It was after the season. So I didn't play with them in the summer of 68.
And if you recall the summer of 68 now, did they play in competition or were they just scrimmaging and just had a team?
I think that they were just coming together as a team. I don't think that they had joined the Toronto District League. That is my recollection.
So if you recall that much, can you recall now when they actually joined the TND? Because as I started the project, the only records I seen in TND was 69.
And that could possibly be correct. I mean, 68, if they were still just like Carly and Dick, and they were not members of any competitive league. They were simply getting together during the summer to play soccer. And that could have been the case with the early United players.
Okay.
So the official team that joined TND would have been 69 would be an appropriate date, or it would be prior to the start of the summer league. That would be appropriate because that would be the beginning of the summer league in 69.
Okay, and now seeing that we reached the beginning of 69 and the official part of West Indies now we get deep into the history here now. They function in 69 competitively. The yearbook saying the team didn't do that well. In interviewing Junior Parker and some of these guys, they said the team wasn't as strong. Records are showing that. I didn't see the TND record yet. Were you aware of that?
Yes, we were. I was aware that we were not considered a top team. Yeah, we had just gone into. I don't even recall, because CND had at that time different levels. I don't think that we were in the first division.
It started in the third division according to the document. Do you have anything to add about Mr. Bailey besides
No, nothing more than what you probably have on Mr. Bailey. I know the name, and I must have. He might have been even associated with the UAIA, which was the Marcus Garvey organization on College Street. I believe that name was part of that organization too.
Okay, so now the meat of the thing now, because as I told you in speaking to you prior to this, is that I always had you more on the Trinity side associated when I came around the Iere and stuff, not knowing you were part of West Indies. Now, some months ago, you told me I've never left. So knowing that there was a split, and that's where I'm at right now with the project, as Miles and everybody said, because there were influx of people like Hornby and the personnel or whatever. So because they attributed to the contrast competition where everybody was kind of finding the identity of the Barbados and stuff. But I want to hear from you. Could you give us a kind of sequence now of what transpired, seeing that you never left?
The conflict, if we want to call it that, came before contrast.
So I don't want to call it a conflict.
I know it was. And it was basically what had happened is that naturally Neville, being the captain, the leader, was eagerly recruiting players that he knew and players that he was in touch with back in Jamaica. And so once they came here, and there were opportunities, because at that time there were some semi-pro leagues and they were looking for players. Malta team was looking for players. So that a number of more skilled Caribbean players, and there were skilled players both coming from Trinidad and from Jamaica, was entering the country in that period. And there was a time when the West Indies team fielded, I would say, 7 or 8 players in the first team of Trinidad background. And then you mentioned Miles Sosa, Alan Moniz, Clyde was West Indies Clyde McNeil was West Indies goalkeeper during that early period before Pele came and replaced Clyde McNeil. Pele was a Jamaican goalkeeper, and he was better skilled than Clyde, so he replaced Clyde at an early stage in West Indies development. What I did not like about I had no problem with the decision to form a Trini-based team, but I thought that the arguments that were being used were not totally truthful, because Trinidadians dominated the West Indies teams in that early year or two. So that I thought that if you want to form an Iere team, fine. That I had no problem with that, but I was not going to leave based on the argument that that Trinidadians, because there was an addition of players from Jamaica, that they were being forced out. There were a lot of highly skilled players coming out of Jamaica, and as Neville having that bond with them, he gravitated towards them. Some of them even stayed at Neville's place. Neville became the arrival spot for a lot of those early Jamaican players like Chubby, later on Neville Bell, you know. So that was my position. I didn't think that I was coming from a Caribbean perspective on what was happening in the community, and I didn't think the argument was strong enough. But nevertheless, there were enough players to form Iere, and Iere went on to be a successful club. Ronald Reiner was one of the key leaders in the formation of Iere. Roland, that time Tony Scarrett, because Tony came in 69.
Yeah.
Are you hearing me now?
You're still off.
And you know who else came? He came after me, because he came in the 70s. Earl Fu. Earl Fu is another major Trini baller who went to United, and that's where he stayed.
Yeah, and his brother, deceased Keith.
And Keith. Keith, yes. Yeah. I got to know Earl here. He's from my neighborhood in East Port of Spain, which is Alton Road, Gonzales area. I got to know him through my brother, Peto, because when Peto came up in 69, Earl, Smokey, and Garth McGlaw were running together, and they will always be at that time. Clyde McNeil and I were living on the Broadview. And that's how I got to know Earl. And then I got to know his history, because we went to the same college in Trinidad. He was a Fatima player, and he was also a major player in Trinidad. So, but he came to United and stayed, and became one of United's most instrumental player in their success moving forward.
You mentioned about living on his Broadview, you say, with Clyde?
Yeah.
You didn't know Clyde from back home, though?
No, I met Clyde at Toronto General Hospital back in the Sri Lanka.
Yeah. So, so you were close with him, see him evolve into this big promoter with Antoine
I was part and parcel of all of that. That whole from the Club Trinidad, the shows that he and Neville were doing at Ontario Place. And also when Clyde also did some fantastic promotions here in Trinidad that many people probably don't know about or forget. Clyde had a weekend of Caribbean exhibits, paintings, and artistic shows at the Hall of Davenport and Young Street.
Masonic Temple.
Masonic Temple. A whole weekend show. That started on Broadway, by the way. There's a hall on Broadway called the Dunn Hall. That's where that activity started. So Clyde is one who should be remembered as someone who made a major contribution to the cultural life, not only Club Trinidad, but all the other promotional activities that when he and Neville and Roy were engaged in bringing key bands from the Caribbean.
Okay, well,
such as Tomorrow's Children,
go ahead.
Charlie's Roots, there's another one that Vote Express, they are, so that was part of their thing.
Because there's a stigma with Clyde, that.
Well aware of that issue.
Yeah, but the thing is like, you have to look at what these guys also bring to the table, and even though, and I don't think many people could have bring what they brought to the table too.
Yeah, exactly. What they were doing, they were pioneers in the field of Caribbean entertainment in Toronto. Neville and Clyde, long before Uncle Ellie, I'm referring to Edward James.
Mm-hmm.
They were the pioneers in that area of bringing Caribbean culture to Toronto.
So about Granville, what thing you and Granville had?
We had an excellent bond. Like I said, going back to the early days of United, and because a lot of the guys, working class guys, coming to Neville, kind of were looking for that kind of bonding and support. And I was there, and Neville was inclined to push me into the situation, talk to this one, and talk to this one, and talk to that one, and talk to this, and Tubby and I got very, very close, I had met Burtis Bell in Jamaica. One day I went down there, and when after Granville had returned, I spent a couple of weeks, but I had met Burtis there before he migrated to Toronto.
Okay.
So that kind of connection, and I guess it came out of my upbringing in London, where you were more or less forced as a community to bond, and so I got to know people from all over the Caribbean during that period. So it was a natural thing for me when I came to Toronto to seek out, Caribbean people generally. I got back into pan, but I started playing pan as a young teenager in Trinidad, and only got back into pan when I came to Toronto. There was no opportunity in London, and I think I'll take this opportunity to thank you for doing it, because I remember seeing a number of the interviews that you've done, and I said, this is a wonderful archive that Midget is creating here, and I am all for us saving our history, collecting our history, and having it available for those who come afterwards, because that too is not something that I think is lacking in our communities, and I'm talking from the Caribbean right through. So when opportunities like this come and someone takes on an initiative like this, I'm exceedingly proud and happy.
Okay, so if you had to wrap it up in terms of the history here, for the young people of today, from when you came early, from having your background from England, how would you wrap up the history here?
I think the Caribbean community should be very proud of itself in regards specifically to the development of soccer, football, as we call it in the Caribbean, in this community. Starting with the Contrast League, which was a very competitive in-house league that most of the Caribbean teams, and there were quite a few Caribbean teams when we got into the 70s, and more people were migrating to Canada. That was a very successful league. We moved from there to Iere, developing what might be considered an international tournament around the Victoria Day weekend. That was exceedingly successful. Most of sports people, people who just wanted to come out to hang, that was the beginning of summer. Sports people look forward to the Iere tournament, which began around the behind the Dufferin Mall, and grew to a recognizable event. So I think that and West Indies went on to be one of the winners in the Ontario in the Canada. Right? So I think that we should be very proud of the contribution that Caribbean youths and people made to the growing athletic and soccer bodies. 3 Canadian teams, Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto, has changed over the years simply because you had much more skillful bowlers coming into the community and committing themselves to those themes. So that they with the change in immigration pattern and immigration flow, that was a likely occurrence, and that's what we see with all the sporting activities.
All right. So, well, Selwyn, Mr. Doc.
Thank you for giving me the time and the information. And as I say, you know, a lot of you guys I see around, and I didn't know you guys play such an instrumental role in the football/soccer here. So again, thanks for giving me this time. We had a lot of challenges, but we were patient, and I think the people would like the fact that they're hearing from you and having more information in that critical foundation time of the sport here.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.